Caitlin Clark was assaulted yesterday in her very first playoff game in the WNBA. Caitlin Clark's trying to pass the ball in the first 2 minutes of the game, and this woman swats at the basketball and somehow decides to turn her hand down and her fingernails and jab them right into the eye of Caitlin Clark.
Following ridiculous fouls on Caitlin Clark, WNBA officials were just terribly humiliated for failing to raise their whistles. What's going on with these referees, really? It's obvious as day that two players from the same freaking squad are attempting to mistreat Clark here. However, what about the referees? They've probably thrown their whistles in the trash because they're snoring over there. Despite being fouled 6 times this season, and for completely absurd reasons, Clark has managed to secure the title of Rookie of the Year. Challenge. Given her exceptional playing ability, she's not your normal novice, though. The true query, though, is this one. The best player on the court, Clark, is called for 6 fouls. How come? And yet, in some way, these so-called veterans who find it unbearable to watch younger players succeed in the WNBA are getting off easy. Yes, I am referring to you. Bonner, Brianna, and Carrington DeJohn, 3 to shoot Clark. Clark wanted a foul and was going to have to hoist from the logo an air ball. It was as if Bonner had run into her. Caitlin Clark also shattered egos, and precisely what happened. Fell on September 25th, 2024, during the Indiana Fever vs. Connecticut Sun WNBA playoff game. The game itself was quite intense, but what made it even more exciting was DeJohn Bonner's absurd and pitiful actions. Yes, we are discussing a seasoned athlete who is behaving like a bully from high school. Your main attraction, your lifeblood, the reason you matter, was just stabbed and attacked and got away with it all. Clark aims for a deep three-pointer in the first quarter. Sincerely, why not? Who's up in Caitlin Clark's face? And who is she? It was none other than Bonner, who seemingly felt compelled to act as Clark's personal shadow. Now that Clark has missed the shot, most players would probably just brush it off and move on, but Bonner chooses to escalate the petty exchange. As they move down the court, she opens her mouth, breaking the professional demeanor. However, Bonner was approached by Clark about how close she was to her landing zone, which is a legitimate worry for any shooter. After all, security is quite crucial, isn't it? Is it something you can talk about that Clark suggested late in the game and Caitlin mentioned regarding the referees in her first response? You know, I just get the impression that there's some physical contact, that these people occasionally come off screens and move in ways that just involve getting bodied a lot. Just let's put it like that. Bonner is incensed by Clark's ascent to prominence in this prod. That was her pitiful attempt to let everyone know that she is still alive. But hey, what do you know? Being a leader doesn't mean you have to put someone down because they're better than you. It reduces you to humor. A seasoned competitor with years of experience should be able to manage a competition, right? But instead, she's making a fool of herself in front of the whole country. I mean, perhaps it's time to reconsider your career approach if your concept of remaining relevant is to bully novices around. No foul call was made. The ESPN broadcast did not actually address it. Following the game, ESPN published a piece that omitted any mention. And let's just say what is evident. The whole point of Bonner's shove was insecurity. Just picture yourself being so agitated by a younger player's achievements that you end up shoving them around. It's almost depressing. Bonner opted to reveal her actual colors, and they're not attractive rather than rising to the situation. Clark had already amassed 6 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists by the end of the opening quarter. Let's contrast that with Bonner's lackluster showing. 3 rebounds, 2 points. Indeed, it didn't exactly work out for her to shove Clark, did it? Bonner was gravely misguided to believe that Clark would be distracted by a cheap shot. Clark continued to deliver, kept her composed, and concentrated on the game. Furthermore, this is not an isolated incident. In the past, Bonner has made an effort to establish his authority when a younger player gains prominence. She reminds me of the playground child who cries, "No new friends," every time someone else dared to demonstrate some talent. Bonner, you don't have to be here for the lead to go forward. As Clark lights up the floor with enthusiasm and intensity, Bonner is working hard to establish herself as a significant player. And as I read this news, I wonder where it mentions that WNBA player Michael Jordan was molested. One would imagine that someone with her experience would coach and encourage the upcoming generation of artists. However, nope, she's too preoccupied making cheap jabs. It appears as though she has lost sight of the true essence of basketball. Cooperation, deference, and rivalry. Bonner is choosing the easy route instead, and it is not helping her. If anything, it's highlighting how disconnected from reality she is from the league's current situation. And let's not even discuss the hypocrisy. Bonner is a purported big-time veteran who is here to teach the younger players how to play the game. And when the chips are down, what does she do? Behaves cruelly in the schoolyard. It's tragic as well as incredibly embarrassing. Rather than being the one to lead by example, she's just modeling behavior for everyone to follow when they're feeling hot. And if you thought Bonner's shove was the height of silliness, get comfortable because DeJounte Carrington chose to turn the ridiculousness factor up even further. Here we are on September 22nd, 2024, during a WNBA playoff game between the Connecticut Sun and the Indiana Fever around the 8.5-minute mark of the first quarter. What happens? In the process of defending Caitlin Clark, Carrington manages to jab her in the eye. Now, this isn't a conversation about a mild tap. Clark's eye swelled and was bruised. DeJounte Carrington was stabbed by this Dijon eye. Caitlin Clark staring right into her own nail salon. Yes, exactly. In a playoff game with enormous implications, Clark finds himself dealing with a poked eye as if it were a pickup game after school. Hold on, things get better, nothing wrong. Give that some thought. There was not a single foul called against Carrington. The referees appeared to be watching a completely separate game. Is it really expected of us to think it's okay to poke someone in the eye during a game? I have a bridge to sell if that is the case. There was solid justification for the fans' ire. Since this is professional basketball, the official's job is to maintain control over play. How did they proceed? Dozing off. Looking at TikTok, both of our guesses are valid. Since Caitlin Clark is, of course, stronger than most, let's now discuss how she handled it. Did she roll around on the floor or moan? Nope. She stood up and dismissed it as unimportant. Even though she acknowledged that the poke hurt her quite a bit, did that stop her from posting numbers? Not at all. Could you briefly describe your eye to us? How did the hit affect you, if at all, and how did it continue for the remainder of the game? Regards. Yes, you've clearly got a good look in my eye. It's the kind of tenacity that sets Clark apart. Despite having a swollen and bruised eye, she was able to remain imprisoned and continue giving birth. We refer to that as mental toughness, and Carrington would be better off taking notes on it than slapping people over the face. But for a moment, let's be honest, Carrington ought to have been reprimanded for that careless action. You can't just poke someone in the eye, walk away like nothing happened, and leave them with a swollen face. I mean, are the officials scared to flag her for a foul? Have they stopped whistling? It's absurd. The first female athlete in American history to achieve superstar status was attacked 2 minutes into the game during a dirty play by one of these women who stabbed her in the eye with her long, false fingernails. Fans exploded on social media, asking for action, and who could blame them? They were justified in becoming incensed. What kind of message is it sending if you can poke someone in the eye and then turn aside as if nothing had happened? Supporters desire a fair game, not careless actions that go unpunished. The WNBA has to start taking player accountability for reckless acts very seriously. Things like this cannot be ignored, and you cannot expect the integrity of the game to be upheld. And let's not act as though Clark confused her with this foolishness. Clark remained inside, taking care of business like an expert, while Carrington was outside, probing and prodding like an impatient child on a road trip. The player who can take a cheap shot and yet remain competitive is the one you want to center your organization around. To be honest, Carrington's careless jab simply brought out the best in Clark's poise. How might a player attempt to undermine another player's strategy and come out looking even more formidable? It's nearly absurd. Let's now discuss how Clark handled it, as Caitlin Clark is undoubtedly more resilient than most. Did she roll around on the floor or moan? Nope, she stood up and dismissed it as unimportant. She even acknowledged that the poke hurt her quite a bit. Did that, however, stop her from posting numbers? Not at all. It's the kind of tenacity that sets Clark apart. Despite having a swollen and bruised eye, she was able to remain imprisoned and continue giving birth. We refer to that as mental toughness, and Carrington would be better off taking notes on it than slapping people over the face. Let's get for a moment, though. Carrington ought to have been reprimanded for that careless action. You can't just poke someone in the eye, walk away like nothing happened, and leave them with a swollen face. I mean, are the officials scared to flag her for a foul? Have they stopped whistling? It's absurd. Can you blame the fans for taking to social media and demanding action? They were justified in becoming incensed. What kind of message is it sending if you can poke someone in the eye and then turn aside as if nothing had happened? Supporters desire a fair game, not careless actions that go unpunished. The WNBA has to start taking player accountability for reckless acts very seriously. Things like this cannot be ignored, and you cannot expect the integrity of the game to be upheld. And let's not act as though Clark confused her with this foolishness, while Carrington was adeptly pushing and poking in that area. A franchise is built around players like that, someone who is able to remain competitive while taking a cheap shot. To be honest, Carrington's careless jab simply brought out the best in Clark's poise. How might a player attempt to undermine another player's strategy and come out looking even more formidable? It's nearly absurd.